One of gospel music's most beloved families was about to embark on what should have been a routine flight to Seattle. They were heading to perform on the prestigious Gaither Homecoming Alaska cruise, excited about the week ahead. But at 26,000 feet, something went catastrophically wrong. This is the story of the Nelons, a family that shaped Southern gospel music for nearly 5 decades, and the devastating tragedy that took 3 generations in a single moment. On a Friday evening, the 26th of July, 2024, a single-engine turboprop Pilatus PC-12 departed from Nebraska City with 7 people aboard. The passengers included 3 members of the Nelons: Kelly Nelon Clark, who had led the group since 1997, her husband Jason Clark, whose voice had been part of the family sound since 1994, and their daughter Amber Nelon Kistler, carrying forward the family's musical legacy. Also on board were Amber's husband Nathan Kistler, family assistant Melody Hodges, and the pilot Larry Haney, chairman of the Georgia Department of Corrections Board, along with his wife Melissa. The flight was cruising smoothly at approximately 26,000 feet over Wyoming when the situation began to unravel. According to the National Transportation Safety Board's preliminary report, the pilot contacted the Salt Lake City Air Route Traffic Control Center to declare an emergency. His message was clear and urgent. He had lost autopilot functionality. Air traffic controllers immediately began working with the pilot, providing guidance and advising him of the minimum instrument flight rules altitude. But then came the transmission that would be the last anyone would hear from that aircraft. The pilot's voice came through the radio, trying to get control of the airplane. After that, silence. Despite repeated attempts by controllers to make contact, there was no further response. Air traffic data tells the story of those final moments in stark, technical detail. The Pilatus PC-12, which had been maintaining a steady cruise altitude, suddenly began making erratic maneuvers. The aircraft executed a 270-degree right turn, a movement that made no sense for a plane heading to Seattle. Then it entered a descending 180-degree right turn. The plane was no longer flying. It was falling. People on the ground in the remote Campbell County area of Wyoming became unwitting witnesses to the tragedy unfolding above them. Multiple witnesses reported hearing a loud whining noise cutting through the night air. The sound of the engine changed, becoming a roar that echoed across the landscape. One witness provided a detail that reveals just how out of control the aircraft had become. They reported seeing the airplane perform a barrel roll maneuver before it impacted the ground. This wasn't controlled flight. This was a machine in its death spiral. The Pilatus PC-12 struck the Earth with devastating force at approximately 1 a.m. Saturday morning. The impact created a crater measuring about 10 feet long, 41 feet wide, and 6 feet deep. Most of the wreckage was embedded in the ground, testament to the incredible speed and force of the crash. Within moments, fire erupted. The flames spread rapidly across the dry Wyoming terrain, eventually consuming about 40 acres. The crash site's remote location created immediate challenges for emergency responders. Firefighters rushed to the scene, but they weren't just dealing with a crash investigation. They were fighting a wildfire that threatened to spread even further across the wilderness. Throughout Friday night, crews deployed airplanes and heavy equipment, working to contain the blaze. By the time they managed to bring it under control, 38 to 40 acres had burned. The National Transportation Safety Board sent investigators, but reaching the crash site proved difficult. The remoteness of the location, the active wildfire, and the difficult terrain meant that investigators couldn't immediately access the wreckage. It wasn't until Saturday that they could begin the painstaking process of documenting the scene. Every piece of debris, every burn pattern, every detail had to be carefully recorded. The NTSB eventually transported the wreckage to a secure facility for detailed examination. Investigators would spend weeks analyzing every component, looking for the definitive cause of the crash. The preliminary report provided the framework of what happened, but the final report, which would explain why it happened, was still pending. Autumn Nelon Streetman, Kelly's youngest daughter, had traveled separately with her husband Jamie. They had taken a different route to Seattle, arriving safely at the hotel where gospel music artists were gathering for the cruise. They were probably tired from their own journey, maybe already thinking about unpacking and getting ready for the week ahead. Then came the news that would shatter everything. Bill and Gloria Gaither, legends of gospel music and organizers of the cruise, were already at the hotel when Autumn and Jamie arrived. Instead of the joyful reunion everyone had anticipated, the scene was one of devastation. Artists gathered together, praying, singing hymns through tears, and surrounding Autumn and Jamie with the kind of support that only a close-knit community can provide. Autumn was pregnant with a baby boy. She would now face the impossible task of mourning her mother, stepfather, and sister, while preparing to bring new life into the world. In her public statement, she thanked people for their prayers, and specifically mentioned her husband Jamie, their unborn son, and Jason's parents Dan and Linda Clark. The composure required to make that statement in those first hours after receiving the news speaks to a strength most people will never need to summon. Hours before the crash, the Nelons had posted a video on their Instagram account from Nebraska City, Nebraska. In that video, they appeared cheerful and animated, talking directly to their fans. They mentioned grabbing a meal, boarding the plane, and heading to Montana. They were excited about the journey ahead, completely unaware that these would be their final words to the world. That video remains on their account, a preserved moment of normalcy before everything changed. The Nelons weren't just another gospel group. They were an institution in Southern gospel music, with roots going back to the 1972. The story began with Rex Nelon, Kelly's father, a visionary who took over leadership of another famous family group called the Lefevres. In 1977, when the original family members had departed, he rebranded them as the Rex Nelon Singers. By 1985, they had simply become the Nelons. Kelly had actually started singing with her father's group part-time in 1972, when she was still discovering her own vocal abilities. She joined full-time later, and eventually, in 1997, when Rex retired, Kelly took over leadership of the group. She became the driving force behind their continued success, managing the business side while maintaining the artistic excellence that had defined them from the beginning. Jason Clark joined in 1994, bringing his own unique vocal qualities to the family sound. Then, in 2002, their daughter Amber began singing with them, creating a true multi-generational legacy. This wasn't a manufactured group put together by a record label. This was an authentic family creating music together, traveling together, and building something that transcended typical entertainment industry boundaries. The Nelons defied easy categorization. Their website described their sound as a captivating blend of gospel, a cappella hymns, Americana, folk, and inspirational music. They took the deeply rooted traditions of Southern gospel and infused them with contemporary sensibility, without losing the essence of what made gospel music powerful. They could perform a traditional hymn that would move older listeners to tears, then transition to something more contemporary that resonated with younger audiences. Their catalog represents nearly 5 decades of musical evolution. Come Morning became their first #1 hit, and was later named the Southern Gospel Song of the Decade for the 1980s. We Shall Wear a Robe and Crown became one of their most recognizable songs, performed in churches across America for generations. Other classics included Over a Thousand Tongues, The Sun's Coming Up, I'll Talk to the Father, I'm Glad I Know Who Jesus Is, and That's Enough. Their most recent award-winning song, If God Pulled Back the Curtain, One Country, Bluegrass, Roots Recorded, Song of the Year, in 2021. Even after decades in the industry, they were still creating relevant, powerful music that connected with audiences. That song title takes on new meaning now, considering the family's sudden encounter with what lies beyond the curtain we call life. The awards and accolades tell part of the Nelons story. They were inducted into the Gospel Music Hall of Fame in 2016, joining the pantheon of gospel music's greatest contributors. They achieved 20 top 5 songs in the Southern gospel format over the course of their career. They received multiple Grammy nominations throughout the years. The Dove Awards, gospel music's highest honor, recognized them repeatedly. 10 Dove Awards, 35 nominations. These numbers represent consistent excellence across multiple decades. Beyond the Doves and Grammys, they received recognition from the Singing News Awards, Absolutely Gospel Awards, Diamond Awards, and Christian Voice Awards. The industry recognized what fans had known for years. The Nelons represented the best of what gospel music could be. But the numbers don't capture the full impact. The awards don't reflect the countless lives touched by their ministry, the churches where their music became part of regular worship, the families who sang their songs together, or the people who found faith or renewed their faith through their recordings. That unmeasurable impact extends far beyond any trophy or plaque. The Nelons' scheduled appearance on the Gaither Homecoming Alaska Cruise speaks to their standing in the gospel music world. Bill and Gloria Gaither aren't just successful performers, they're institutions who have shaped the landscape of gospel music for generations. The Gaither Homecoming concerts and cruises represent the pinnacle of gospel music gatherings, bringing together the genre's most respected names. The 7-day cruise, subtitled Until We Meet Again, was set to depart Saturday and return on August 3rd. The lineup included Mark Lowry, Russ Taff, Sandy Patty, and other luminaries of Christian music. Being invited to perform alongside these names meant the Nelons had reached the highest level of their craft. That subtitle, Until We Meet Again, was meant to evoke the hopeful Christian promise of eternal reunion. After the crash, those words took on a devastating new significance. Bill and Gloria Gaither, along with the Gaither Vocal Band and other cruise performers, gathered in that Seattle hotel not for celebration but for mourning. They prayed together, sang together, and embraced Autumn and Jamie, demonstrating that this community of faith doesn't just perform together, but suffers together. Jackie Patillo, president of the Gospel Music Association, released a statement capturing the collective grief. She spoke of how the entire music community was mourning, and how the GMA would forever cherish Jason, Kelly, and Amber in their Hall of Fame. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp also responded, posting on social media that his entire family was praying for those lost, their loved ones, their communities, and everyone throughout the gospel music world who had lost dear friends. The ripples of this tragedy extended outward in ever-widening circles. Studio musicians who had recorded with them felt the loss. Sound engineers who had mixed their albums mourned. Church music directors who had featured their songs grieved. Fans who had attended their concerts struggled to process the news. Families who had played their music during their own difficult times felt as though they had lost people they knew personally, even if they had never met them face to face. Over the years, the Nelons included numerous talented singers who contributed to the group's sound during different eras. Ken and Janet Pascal, Jerry Thompson, Charlotte Ritchie, Todd Nelon, Kelly's brother, Jeff Stice, Martin Gasco, Rodney Swain, Stan Whitmire, Ray Fisher, and Vernon Lee all left their mark on the group's legacy. Each brought their unique gifts to the Nelons ministry during their time with the group, but the core always remained rooted in the Nelon family bloodline. Rex Nelon built the foundation in the 1,970 seconds and 80 seconds. Kelly maintained and expanded it from 1,997 forward. Jason added his contribution for 3 decades. Amber represented the next generation, showing that the family's musical gifts continued to flow. Now Autumn carries the weight of that entire legacy, dealing with grief while deciding what happens next. Todd Nelon, Kelly's brother, and his wife Rhonda stepped in to support Autumn and Jamie through what the Gaither management statement called the hard tasks that lie ahead. Those tasks include planning funerals for 3 beloved family members. They include managing estates and handling the business matters that don't stop just because tragedy has struck. They include dealing with scheduled concert appearances and contractual obligations that now cannot be fulfilled. Beyond the practical matters lie deeper struggles. Autumn faces decisions about the Nelons' musical legacy. There's unreleased music that may exist in various stages of completion. There are fans who need some form of closure. There's the larger matter of whether the Nelons' music continues in any form, or whether it ends with this tragedy. These decisions cannot be rushed, yet they cannot be delayed indefinitely either. Dan and Linda Clark mourn their son Jason while trying to support the surviving family members. They've lost their son and daughter-in-law and granddaughter in a single catastrophic event. Their grief compounds with each relationship severed by the crash. The National Transportation Safety Board's preliminary report provided the framework of what happened in those final moments. But the full investigation continues. Experts will examine every component of the wreckage now secured in their facility. They'll analyze the autopilot system that the pilot reported had failed. They'll study the flight data, the maintenance records, and every detail that might explain why a routine flight ended in tragedy. The final report, when it's eventually released, will provide technical answers about mechanical failures, or human factors, or environmental conditions. But for the families grieving, no report will bring their loved ones back. No explanation will make the loss easier to bear. The investigation serves the important purpose of potentially preventing future tragedies, but it cannot undo this one. The Nelons recorded for major labels throughout their career: Canaan, Benson, Homeland, Daywind, and Crossroads Music Group. Each label relationship represented a different chapter in their evolution. Their extensive discography now becomes a historical document, preserving voices that have been silenced but can still be heard. Kelly Nelon Clark's voice still resonates through speakers around the world. Jason Clark's harmonies still move. Listeners, Amber Nelon Kistler's talent is preserved in recordings that will outlast everyone listening to them. Every time someone plays "We Shall Wear a Robe and Crown" at a funeral, the Nelons are present. Every time a church choir learns one of their arrangements, the Nelons' influence continues. Every time someone going through difficulty finds comfort in their lyrics, the Nelons' ministry extends beyond their earthly lives. Autumn Nelon Streetman faces a future that looks nothing like what she expected just days before the crash. She'll give birth to a son who will only know his grandmother, grandfather, aunt, and uncle through stories, photographs, and recordings. That boy will grow up knowing he comes from a family that changed gospel music, carrying names and stories, and a heritage that most people never receive. That inheritance is both a precious gift and a heavy burden. The Gospel Music Hall of Fame will preserve the Nelons' place in history. Archives will maintain their recordings. Radio stations will continue playing their music. Churches will continue singing their songs. But the living, breathing presence of the Nelons as a performing group is gone, creating a void that cannot be filled by any other act. The Nelons built their legacy through consistency and authenticity. They showed up for thousands of concerts over nearly 5 decades. They made hundreds of recordings. They had countless personal interactions with fans. They didn't chase trends or compromise their values. They simply did what they did with excellence, year after year, decade after decade. That consistent dedication created something that cannot be destroyed by tragedy. Their story demonstrates that legacy is built in ordinary moments, not just highlight reels. It's built in the daily decisions to show up, to do the work, to treat people well, to create something meaningful. The Nelons understood that their music was ministry, not just entertainment. They used their platform to bring hope, comfort, and inspiration to people who needed it. The gospel music community's response to this tragedy reveals the strength of genuine connection. Bill and Gloria Gaither didn't have to gather artists to pray with Autumn and Jamie. They chose to because that's what real community does. The dozens of other performers on that cruise didn't have to grieve publicly. They did because they had lost friends, not just colleagues. That depth of relationship is rare in any industry. Autumn's story continues forward, and whatever she decides to do with the family legacy is entirely her choice to make. Perhaps she'll eventually return to music in some form. Perhaps she'll find a completely different path. Perhaps she'll discover a way to honor her family's memory that hasn't been conceived yet. Whatever direction she chooses, she deserves support without pressure or expectations. The baby boy she's carrying represents both continuation and new beginning. He'll grow up with recordings of his grandmother's voice, videos of his grandfather performing, photographs of his aunt's smile. He'll carry a heritage that connects him to nearly 5 decades of gospel music history. That connection will shape his identity in ways that are impossible to predict. Todd Nelon and his wife Rhonda now help carry the weight of the family legacy alongside Autumn. Todd sang with the Nelons during part of their history, so he understands both the musical and family dimensions of what has been lost. His support for Autumn in the coming months and years will be crucial as she navigates grief and makes decisions about the future. The Nelons' catalog takes on new dimensions in light of their deaths. Songs about heaven and reunion and eternal life aren't abstract theology anymore. They're personal testimony from people who now know those realities firsthand. When listeners hear Kelly singing about wearing a robe and crown, they're hearing someone who may now be experiencing that very thing. When they hear the family harmonizing about morning coming, they're hearing voices that have reached their own eternal morning. This doesn't romanticize tragedy or diminish the very real grief of those left behind. But it does recognize that for people of faith, death is not the end of the story. The Nelons spent their lives singing about that truth. Now their story has become part of that testimony. The Nelons' tragedy reminds us that life is fragile and time is limited. They posted that cheerful Instagram video just hours before the crash, talking about dinner and the next leg of their journey. They weren't thinking about final goodbyes or last messages. That's how life works. We don't receive warnings about which day will be our last, or which conversation will be our final one. The crash at 26,000 feet, the loss of autopilot, the desperate struggle to regain control, the barrel roll witnessed from the ground, the catastrophic impact, the spreading fire across 40 acres of Wyoming wilderness. These details tell the story of how quickly everything can change. 7 people boarded a plane for what should have been a routine flight. None of them made it to their destination. For Autumn, for Jamie, for Todd and Rhonda, for Dan and Linda Clark, for the extended family and close friends, the grief is fresh and overwhelming. For the gospel music community, the loss cuts deep. For fans around the world, the news brought shock and sadness. But the music remains. The recordings preserve voices and harmonies and ministry that will continue reaching people long after everyone who knew the Nelons personally has passed away. The Nelons shaped Southern gospel music for nearly 5 decades. They influenced countless artists who came after them. They touched lives in ways that can never be fully counted or measured. That legacy stands, unshaken by tragedy, a testament to lives lived with purpose and gifts used faithfully. Kelly, Jason, and Amber are gone, but their song continues, carried forward by every person who plays their music, sings their songs, or finds comfort in their ministry. That's the legacy that matters. That's what endures.